We are now going to learn to deal Omaha high-low 8 or better. But first I'd like to explain the difference in dealing this game and dealing Hold'em. In Omaha, the players receive a total of 4 cards, and the players must use 2 cards from their hand and 3 from the board, from the community, cards on the board. That is the major difference between dealing Hold'em and Omaha. Please remember, the players must use 2 cards from their hand and 3 from the board to make the 5-card best hand. This game also has a qualifier. It's 8 or better, which means the player must qualify in his hand and have at least 2 cards that he can use that are 8 and lower to qualify for the low hand. Also, one thing that is important, the board must qualify. The board must have 3 cards, 8 and lower. I've created this board, and I would like you to practice this way at home to get used to reading 9 cards. Omaha is a little more difficult in that now you have to read 9 cards, and in this game there will be a high and perhaps a low. So I'll start reading the first hand. I'll turn the cards over. First, you are going to read the high hand because we always read the high hand to begin with. In this scenario, the player has an ace-high flush. I'm just going to move these down just a little bit because I'm going to show the ace-high flush. The player must use 3 from the board, which he is, and he must use 2 from his hand. So the player has an ace-high flush with a 4-deuce in his hand. Now I'm going to read the player's low hand. Remember, the board must qualify, and it does. I have 3 low cards, 8 and lower, 8, deuce, and ace. Remember, the ace is used as a high and or low. In this scenario, we're going to use it for a low. And the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, does this player qualify for the low? And the player has 2 low cards, but he does not qualify because he cannot use the deuce as it pairs. So the player does have a high hand, but he has no low. So you will call this hand ace-high flush, no low. I'm going to read the next hand. We're going to read the high hand first, and in this scenario, remember, the player must use 2 from his hand. I see that the player has a pair of jacks, so I'm going to push that up on the board. His next best card in his hand that he has to use is the queen. So that's 2 from his hand. And 2 more from the board would be the ace and the king. So in this scenario, the player has a pair of jacks for his high hand. Let's read his low hand. Does the player qualify? Yes. The player has 2 cards, 8 and lower, in his hand, and they are the 6 and the 3. And as you can see, they don't pair any of the low cards on the board. So in order to read this hand, we're going to read it from the lowest high card in the hand, and it's 86 low. This player's high hand is a pair of jacks, but it does not beat the flush. But this hand must stay on the board because the player qualifies for the low. Reading the third hand. Okay, the player has a pair of deuces, and the next best card in his hand is a 7. So push up the deuce, that's 2 cards. The next best card would be the king, that's 3, 4. The jack and the 7 would be 5. Okay, again, he has a pair of deuces on the board. Please take your time in reading these hands. His low hand, I would need to look for the best low cards. As you can see, he has 4 low cards in his hand, and I'm going to see if they qualify. Let's start with the deuce. Can he use the deuce? No, it pairs. Can he use the 7? Yes, it doesn't pair. Can this player use the 6? Yes, it doesn't pair. Can the player use the 5? Yes, because it doesn't pair any of the low cards on the board. But the player is allowed to use only 2, so we are going to pick the best 2 cards we are going to pick the best 2 cards out of this hand for the player. Remember, the player has 3 cards from the board to the low, and we're going to go to the lowest of the cards that he has. And in this hand, it would be 6-5. So now the player has an 86 low. His high hand is a pair of deuces. It does not beat the flush. This player here, he has a pair of jacks for the high hand. It does not beat the flush. But this player has a low. Let's take a look at this hand. His low cards are 8, 6, 3, 2, 1. This player's low hand is 8, 6, 5, 2, 1. So who would win? Being that both players are using the 8 and both players have a 6, the next best lowest card is the 3. So this player's 5 card is too high. So at this time I'm going to muck his hand because he does not qualify for the high and he does not qualify for the low to be awarded any portion of the pot. This is how I would like you to practice this game at home. Set up your scenario with 3 low cards on the board, 2 high cards, and just turn over the player's card and read the high hand first. Remember, the player must use 3 from the board and 2 from the hand. After you identify the player's high hand, please go to the low hand and see if the player qualifies, and by that I mean to see if he has 2 cards to the low, 8 or better, in his hand.